Welcome back to another episode of Organic Chemistry. Today I'm going to tell you about the first big project that I worked on in my PhD, the Transesterification of Thionoesters. So to give you a little bit of background, if you haven't seen the deoxyfluor video, I'd encourage you to go watch it right now, and I'll put a card to it here. I've done a lot of work with thionoesters. Typically the way that these are prepared is from esters using Lawson's reagent. Now when you do these reactions, you can sometimes get really poor yields, but you'll almost always get incomplete conversion. And because thionoesters are almost identical to their ester counterpart, it's really challenging to separate them using chromatography. Distillations are usually off the table because thionoesters tend to decompose. So anytime you want to make a new analog, you have to do another dumb Lawson's reagent reaction, and it sucks every time. Sometimes yields are okay, other times they're not okay at all, and usually it's a real pain to get rid of any ester that remains. So it's not fun. And so recently, when I had started taking my PhD, I had taken a polymer chemistry course in my undergrad, and we had talked about the recycling of polyethylene terephthalate. And so here you can see this is the structure of PETE, polyethylene terephthalate, and you can see in the presence of a catalyst with methanol, it's possible to convert PETE to this dimethyl ester as well as ethylene glycol. And so previously there had been a couple reports of base used as a catalyst to allow the transesterification of thionoesters. Now these were relatively minor examples where they had one or two cases in each case, and when I had started this project I wasn't familiar with it. I wasn't able to find the DOI for the second reference, so I'm just including the full reference here. And so the idea is essentially this. You take an ester, you make a methyl thionoester, and then you can treat it with a base catalyst in the presence of another alcohol. A transesterification reaction can occur, and then methanol is formed as the product, and methanol can just boil off. And so the advantage of this is, yes, you still have to make the methyl ester, but then if you have a bunch of interesting functional groups in your R prime group, you don't have to worry about them having functional group compatibility issues with Lawson's reagent. And so instead of having to do like 100 Lawson's reagent reactions, you could do like 1 to 10 of them, and then several transesterifications. And so the functionality with different functional groups and the compatibility with Lawson's is probably the biggest driver for this. Also, the purification of a methyl thionoester from some derivative is a lot easier than a methyl thionoester from a methyl ester. So the scope of this reaction is actually quite good. So in this slide, I'm just going to show you some of the derivatives made from methyl thionobenzoate to other thionobenzoates. So here you can see a bunch of different alkyl groups are tolerated, as well as some analogs of polyethylene glycol. Some other benzylic alcohols were tolerated, free alcohols were tolerated, as well as secondary alcohols and primary alkyl chloride containing alcohols. Here you can see some more interesting functional groups, including this oxetane, this pyridine in these two cases, this perfluoroalkyl group, and this alkyl silane. Now when we go to other thionoesters that are aliphatic, we can see that another great scope is seen. So you can see cyclopropyl groups, cyclobutyl groups, silane, alkenes, perfluoroalkyl groups. We have this tertiary amine here, we have this ketal, as well as some PEG derivatives, polyethylene glycol, and this terminal alkyl chloride. And this even works for heterocyclic compounds. So here you can see we have furans, thiophenes, as well as N-methylperols, pyridines, this pyrazine, N-methyl-indole, indazoles, as well as cinnamate derivatives. So quite a few heterocycles were tolerated. The main thing that limited this methodology was my ability to access methyl thionoesters of heterocycles. I'm confident that this methodology would actually still work on a lot of other heterocycles in a lot of other contexts, as long as you're able to prepare the methyl thionoester. If you can't use the thionoester, it's actually okay to use dithioesters quite often. And if you use like methyl dithioester, you can actually transesterify with some of the alcohols that wouldn't be reactive enough to react with methyl thionoesters. So some of the limitations include phenylethanol. For whatever reason, phenylethanol is a stubborn example and it won't go. I have no idea why. I haven't been able to get this to work in any case, which is kind of odd because benzylic alcohols as well as phenylpropanol works totally fine. You can see that phenols aren't tolerated. This is likely because they're better leaving groups than methanol. Additionally, you can see that very electron deficient alcohols are not sufficiently reactive. So here you can see trifluoroethanol, trichloroethanol, as well as chloroethanol. Finally, tertiary alcohols were also unreactive. But aside from these, the scope was quite good for this chemistry. And so you can see that heat is required for this transformation, although these reactions typically run somewhere between 70 and 80 degrees. The other disadvantage is when I've done this chemistry, I've just used the alcohol as the solvent. So usually about 1 millimole of substrate in about a mil of alcohol or half a mil of alcohol. It just needs to be enough to get everything mixing. And because these are done with like an uncapped vessel, the methanol just boils off. So it's possible that a co-solvent could be used, but during my time working on this project, I just utilized the simplified approach of just using the alcohol on its own. Now, the final disadvantage is that the methyl thionoester or the dithioester must be prepared. So dithioesters are typically prepared using Grignard chemistry and subsequent alkylation with an alkylating agent such as iodomethane if you're going to make the methyl dithioester. But overall, there's other methodology that exists to access these types of compounds. Now, it's still a disadvantage because you somehow have to put it on there, but overall, it makes it a lot easier to build a diverse library of building blocks. And so the utility of thionoesters, it varies. In this case, I'm only going to briefly just discuss this fluorination chemistry that we presented in this paper. So you can see that we take thionoesters and treat it with HF pyridine in the presence of N-iodosuccinimide. This is among the milder conditions to form difluoroethers. Although if you're going to do this chemistry, I'd suggest that you actually use silver fluoride because this has N-iodosuccinimide and some undesired iodinations can occur. And so the reason that you can see only benzylic difluoroethers here is because when we tried this transformation with any of our heterocyclic derivatives, we were getting a lot of side reactions and it was a little bit messy. So these thionoesters can be used for other stuff. You could imagine reducing away this thiocarbonyl with something like Reynaud nickel. You could do cycloaddition chemistry to these, like Barton-Kellogg olefination. And in the future, if you're interested, I can do a video of the chemistry of thionoesters. If you're interested in me doing that, I'd appreciate it if you could just leave a comment down below. And so with that, I hope you've enjoyed this video about the transesterification of thionoesters. If you like the style of video where I talk about a paper that I've worked on, I could do a few more in the future. It would really help out the channel if you left a like and subscribed, and I hope you have a great day.